Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast. You're listening here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brice Lewis, and we're going to have another great show for you today, talking about all things NFL with some college. And we're going to kick it right off here with some playoff talk, as the divisional round is this weekend in the NFL. Both AFC and NFC games, 4 games total on the slate. And I'm going to go ahead and break down what I think of these games and what I think both teams need to do to be successful in this game. So we're going to start with the AFC, and we're going to talk about their group of games. And the first game we're going to talk about is Tennessee versus Baltimore, a game that this game could go by pretty fast. I mean, you have two of the best ball control teams, I feel like, in the entire playoffs. Obviously, as you know, Baltimore is one of the best rushing teams in the league. Honestly, they predicate their entire offense around running the ball with Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards in the entire backfield. And then you got Tennessee with Derrick Henry, who they really ride. They ride Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry can take them home. And Derrick Henry is one of the best, if not, some people consider the best running back in the NFL. And so this game's going to come down to basically, to me, quarterback play. A lot of people feel like in this game, you know, these teams may be able to run the ball on each other a little bit. They can get some ball control. But who can make the most plays through the passing game, in my opinion? Obviously, if you look at it, you may have more trust in Lamar Jackson than you do in Ryan Tannehill, because Lamar Jackson, even though he's never been in this situation except from last year, just the season he's having, as he's projected to be MVP this year, you feel better about him playing in these games. Tannehill's first playoff game was last week, which he won, but he really didn't do too much in the passing game. He did get a touchdown and commit a couple of plays, but he really didn't do too much of the passing game to New England. So this is definitely going to be an interesting game. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens on both sides, really, because both teams have all the potential in the world to be, you know, champions, in my opinion, because they have the formula, which is running game and good defense. Now, the only difference is Baltimore's defense, I do think, is better than Tennessee's, because Tennessee's defense is a little weak on the back end. They are very susceptible to big plays, where the Ravens this year made a key trade by trading for Marcus Peters to help shore up the back end with Earl Thomas back there. So they feel pretty good about the passing game. But, you know, obviously Tennessee has some dangerous weapons with A.J. Brown, you know, Sharp, Smith. You know, they have some weapons that you got to worry about, you know, Corey Davis. So if they can make some plays in the passing game, I feel like they have a good chance to potentially win this game. And Tannehill just has to be efficient and not turn the ball over. If he does that, I think the Tennessee has their formula, and obviously Derrick Henry, I think, has to be able to run the ball. If he doesn't have to do what he did last week, but he has to have similar to what he did last week and have that type of effect on the game. Because once they start changing the defense to stop him, then that could give more over the top plays for Tennessee. Or on Baltimore's side, since they're predicated around running the ball, the problem with them is that their quarterback can beat you too. So not only are you dealing with, you know, Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards and Hill and everybody coming downhill, Lamar Jackson could keep it on a quarterback keeper or RPO and do you up. Like, I mean, he could sit here, break your ankles, cross you up, all of those things. And that's what makes Lamar Jackson such a dangerous quarterback. That's what makes him such a dangerous player, because he can do that to you. And you've seen it multiple times, how he's made defenders look silly out there because of that. And this game, like I said, it's going to come down to just who can control the ball the best, and also who doesn't make the most mistakes, but also makes the most plays through the passing game. I feel like coaching-wise, I mean, John Harbaugh has the experience, so you have to give the edge to him. But the thing about it is, you know, Mark Vrabel really, you can almost say in a way, out-coached Bill Belichick last week. Mike Vrabel looks like he will be a great coach to come. He will be a great coach in Tennessee for maybe a long time. There was a sequence of last week's game against the Patriots where basically he was able to waste like a minute or a minute and a half of clock, which was like midway through the fourth quarter, which actually helped the Patriots get less time because he kept taking penalties because what he knew in the rollback, if we take these penalties, time will continue to run, which gives less time to New England. And that was a very smart coaching move on his part. So I would not be surprised. I do not expect him to be overwhelmed in this game by John Harbaugh. And I think it's just going to come down to who makes plays, which team's best players make plays. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to for both sides. And then switching to the other AFC game, Chiefs and Texans. This is a great quarterback matchup between two of the bright young stars of quarterbacks that we have in today's NFL, the future, as they say, of the NFL. And basically, if you think about it logically, it's not, to me, it's not the quarterback that's going to win the game for either team. It's defense. Because Deshaun Watson has showed even against the best defenses he can make plays, especially if the Texans get Will Fuller back this week with DeAndre Hopkins and everybody. And, obviously we know about the Chiefs' air raid attack with Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman and, all those guys. So for me, it's about defense. Who can make the most stops? Now obviously the advantage on offensive line goes to Kansas City, but Houston with J.J. Watt and Merciless, they're going to have to get some pressure on Patrick Mahomes, make him a little uncomfortable in the pocket, move him around a little bit, get him off his spot, even though Mahomes can make plays on the run, you rather take your chances with that and hopefully get some sacks. Get him a little, give him some happy feet back there in the pocket. Because that's going to be the key for him, that's what's going to be the key for a lot of people, in my personal opinion, if he wants to contribute and win a game. Because it's going to be important for him to really come out there and compete at the highest level on offense for Kansas City to be able to win this game for Mr. Mahomes. But Houston's defense, if they can get pressure, they can definitely influence some things and stop some things up, which I think is going to be what they need to do if they want to come out and be successful in this game. Now, for Houston, obviously, one thing that really hindered them last week when they played Buffalo was the fact that Buffalo was able to get pressure early on the Deshaun. I think they had 5 sacks in the first half, I believe. And I think that really hindered him because the problem is that we all know Houston's offensive line is still a work in progress. The only position that they have solidified for sure is the left tackle position, Laremy Tunsil. But, and knowing that, at the same time, they have to be able to, protect Deshaun. If they can't, then they don't have a chance. If they can, then they have a chance. Because with the weapons they have offensively, if Deshaun Watson gets an offensive line, they could be one of the best, if not one of the best passing attacks in the league. Maybe just as good as Kansas City's. It's just they don't have the same offensive line, and Deshaun's constantly under pressure. But he also is probably one of the best players in the league in terms of movement, in terms of getting out of pocket, making plays. That's why Dabo Swinney called him the Michael Jordan of football. This man in the clutch is always probably the most dangerous player out there on the field because he can make that Houdini play that gets them right back in the game and gets them a victory. And obviously that's something that they want. They want to get a victory. There's something they want to do. They want to end up getting a great championship for Houston one day, especially with all the stuff that Houston's been through. So, I think that's what's going to come down to. Coaching matchup, obviously Bill O'Brien is the most, I consider him probably at rate in the rest of this playoffs, the worst coach, because I feel like he's a very inconsistent coach because Houston plays very inconsistently. Because Houston could come out this week and act like they're the best team ever assembled. But we don't know which Houston we're going to get because that's the type of coaching they are. They just make errors in the game, but just leaves you crashing your head, and you're just like, huh? But at the end of the day, even with all that, they've won 4 out of the last 5 division titles. So they're winning, but maybe is that because they have Deshaun and they have a lot of talent, or is it because of the coaching? So I was going to get the advantage to Andy Reid. Andy Reid's obviously one of the best offensive play callers that we've ever seen in this league. His offensive knowledge is what helps keep the offense moving. He adds new plays all the time, and that's why the offense is still effective after all these years, about 2 decades in this league. Andy Reid's still chugging it out there offensively. And, this is going to come down to just who makes, like I said, whoever plays the best defensively and also best coaching. And special teams can also become a factor in this game also. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens because, like I said, both teams, this is going at Kansas City. So obviously Houston's going into a hostile environment in Kansas City. Remember, Kansas City was a play away from the Super Bowl last year. And without New England in there, they feel like there should be no one that stops them. And because they feel confident against Baltimore because they've beaten them twice in the last 2 years. But coming up next, we're going to switch over to the NFC and talk about the NFC playoff games right here.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the AFC games. Obviously, that's Chiefs and Texans, Titans and Ravens. And it's funny because you're so used to the Patriots being here still, but they were knocked out last week. Hopefully, it's the end of a dynasty. Maybe have some more evenness in the AFC, but now we're going to switch to the NFC games. And very, very good slate of games on the NFC side. And we're going to start with Vikings and 49ers. This game, I expect to be... See, the thing about this game is that last game with the Vikings was, I would say, was more of a defensive game. I wouldn't say it was an offensive explosion. And I feel like that's how the game has to be this week for the Minnesota Vikings to be able to pull out the victory. Like, this can't get into a shootout with the 49ers. Kirk Cousins is capable, but even though he had his big performance and proved a lot of people wrong last week, we don't know if he can come back and do it again this time around. So, you want to keep it between 20 and probably 24 points in Minnesota's defense. Because if Dalvin Cook plays like he did last week and they have the same success running the ball, and Kirk Cousins make plays when he has to with the receivers he has, they have just as good of a chance as they had last week to beat the 49ers. But the 49ers, they're just as good. They could beat you in different ways. They could beat you in a defensive game. They could beat you in a high-scoring game. There's more confidence on that side because we've seen it this season on the 49ers. We haven't seen it from Minnesota. So it's kind of one of those things where it's just like, who do you trust in this game? Talking about Minnesota, Dalvin Cook really helped because Dalvin Cook's so explosive. Dalvin Cook's one of those guys, when he hits a hole, he's so fast that he gets 3-4 yards just because he's so fast through the hole. Where that advantage comes where it's just, he honestly makes you think at any time he could break off a very big run. He really does. He makes you think at any time that he could pull off a very big run. And if you're Minnesota, that's what you want from him because it helps with ball control, it helps keep the chains moving, and it can set you up for play action because play action game is the best. Kirk Cousins on play action with these receivers is when Minnesota is at their best, which is just as good as anyone in the league. So they're going to have to make sure they basically do the same thing they did last week. And hopefully, we'll have to see how healthy they are. Xavier Woods got a little banged up last week. Maybe they can get one of their corners back because they were short on corners last week. That's the good thing about sometimes having injuries in the playoffs. If you can get through a round, you might be able to get a player back the next following week, which then could help the run. Because like I say, Minnesota is just as talented and good as any team in this playoffs. The reason why we never consider them a threat is because of Kirk Cousins. And I remind people, it reminds me of what happened back in Jacksonville with Blake Bortles. They had the talent, but we didn't trust the quarterback. And they actually even had more hype because their defense was so dominant that year that even with Blake Bortles, they could make it. But it's just what Blake Bortles cost them. In this situation, it's the same way. The Vikings are just as talented. Defense, defensive line, they can run the ball, receivers, tight end. It's just, do you trust Kirk Cousins? Can Kirk Cousins play well enough to get them to where they could go with the talent that they do have? And that's the big question on Minnesota's side of the ball. And 49ers is pretty much the same thing. It's like this. If you think about it, Jimmy Garoppolo, there's still questions about him. Can he really be the guy to get him to a championship? Is he clutch? Can he win the big game? He's won big games, but he also has lost a lot of closing games. Obviously, the 49ers have lost a lot of games with the buzzer this year. They almost lost another one against Seattle in the final game of the season. So it's one of those things where it's like, do you trust it? Do you believe in it? Do you think Jimmy Garoppolo can get you over the top? Some people are not sold. I know people, I've talked to people who've told me, I don't think he's as good as he thinks he is. And we'll see. This is going to be big. I think this is going to be a close game. So this is going to be a chance for Jimmy Garoppolo to show everybody in the league that he's just as good as the 49ers think he is, and that's why he's the quarterback, because they have everything. They can run the ball, and that's one thing. Obviously, a common theme in this playoffs is running the ball, especially on the NFC side of things. Minnesota can run the ball, and the 49ers can run the ball. The 49ers run the ball more with a community of backs. Minnesota's pretty much one guy and then a guy who spells them here and there. And I think this is going to be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, George Kittle's one of the best tight ends in the game. And defensively, we know what the 49ers have on the defensive side of the ball. Quan Alexander could come back this week. He's one of the best linebackers. He's one of the more better linebackers in the league. He's been hurt with a torn pectoral, but he could come back this week. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this game. There's definitely tons of potential in this game to be one of the best games of the weekend, in my opinion. And I would not be surprised if Minnesota got an upset here, but we don't know. I'll give you my predictions later in the show. Next playoff game, we're going to get to Packers and Seahawks. Packers and Seahawks have had some great games in the past. Great quarterback matchup between Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Now, obviously, on Green Bay's side of it, a lot of people question Aaron Rodgers. They wonder, is he as good as he's been? Because he hasn't had the greatest season. And people wonder the way they've been skipping out of games against bad teams or mediocre teams they've been embarrassed against good teams, like a very good to playoff teams. And so you wonder, can they win these types of games? Now, obviously, on Seattle's side, they don't have both the running backs. So you kind of wonder about that. And it's something that's very interesting to me because Aaron Rodgers needs this game to show that he's still just as good as he's been in previous years, to show that he's ready, to show that he's the guy. And, a lot of people question this 13-3 team. I said this in a couple of my episodes ago. The Green Bay Packers are the most questioned 13-3 team I think I've seen in a while. Because a lot of people just feel like it's maybe the product of a weak schedule. And they really haven't had the hardest schedule in the world. And so if Green Bay wants to prove to people that they're as good as they say they are and that the record says they are, they come out in this game and they make plays and they beat Seattle at home. Now, on Seattle's side of things, obviously, the running game has not been as great, obviously, with all the injuries at running back. I think they'll have their best running performance this week because I think third week back for Marshawn Lynch, he has 2 games under his belt. He'll start to play more Marshawn Lynch football. Travis Homer, I think, is a good third down option. Obviously, Russell Wilson, It's one of the best quarterbacks in the game. DK Metcalf had a big game last week, so they're going to definitely expect him to have a big game. Obviously, we know about Tyler Lockett. You know what I'm saying? They have the guys to make some plays out here for this team, and defensively, you know, led by Bobby Wagner. You know, they can. There's some potential here. It's one of those things where I don't feel like in this game any team has a decided advantage. The best thing you probably can say is that Green Bay's running game is better than Seattle's running game. By far, because Aaron Jones is proven to be one of the best running backs in the league this year and led the league in rushing touchdowns this year also. So I think that's one of the things that is going to really contribute and be shown in this situation. I also believe this. If the Packers want to win this game, they got to make sure they get some turnovers in this game. I think when they won the Super Bowl back in 2009, they got turnovers. And I think if they're going to win the Super Bowl this year and make a run, they got to get turnovers. I honestly feel like Green Bay's in a good position because if they beat Seattle, the Vikings beat the 49ers. They've beaten the 49ers. They beat the Vikings twice this year. They've swept them. They've outplayed them both times. So I feel like Green Bay would feel pretty good about that matchup because they know how to beat the Vikings. The Vikings haven't beaten them yet. But that 49ers game, the last time they played the 49ers, they got destroyed. And obviously, if you're a Green Bay fan, that would worry you. If you have to play them against you, don't know what's going to happen. And then when they destroyed you, I think they were at Green Bay, I believe. So this is going to be at the 49ers. So that's going to be definitely something that you should be worried about as a Green Bay fan. But it's definitely going to be a great game between him and Seattle, Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Coming up next, we're going to get into some NFL news. We're going to talk about some of the coaching around the league. Joe Judge, Matt Rule coming up.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the NFC games. We talked about the NFC divisional playoff games. My thoughts and opinions on those, and both of my thoughts and opinions on both games, and just how both games can turn out depending on who makes the right adjustments and who makes the right decisions. But now we're going to get into some coaching talk. Obviously, we're still in the midst of coaching. Only one vacancy left, but I'll talk about that next segment. This segment, we're going to talk about some of the hirings that have been made this week. And also, we're going to talk more about the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. We're going to start with Mike McCarthy. Now, some people, initial reviews, a lot of people are unsure how to feel about this hiring because people just feel like they could have got a young, up-and-coming coach. Instead, they got Mike McCarthy, who isn't bad. And the thing about it is this. It's not that Mike McCarthy is a bad coach, but is he the right coach for, is he the right coach for the Cowboys? Now, when he was with Green Bay, he was 7-3 against the Cowboys, which a report came out saying that was one of the reasons why Jerry Jones hired him because maybe perceptionally, Green Bay was less talented at those times against the Cowboys, but obviously beat them more. So maybe it's like, okay, he's shown the ability to maybe take the talent he has and uplift it. So maybe Jerry Jones was thinking, oh, he can do the same with the talent we have. Because obviously Jerry Jones probably is looking for someone who can use the talent that he has and uplift it. So that way they can end up, reaching their potential that Jerry Jones thinks they can reach. But it's something that's interesting to think about. I think Mike McCarthy, his coaching staff right now looks pretty good. Now, right now, I think they're leaning to keep Kellen Moore, but as a defensive coordinator, he's bringing in Mike Nolan, one of the more respected defensive coaches in the league. So it's one of those things where it's just like, you got to really see what happens. You got to see what happens. I wouldn't panic if I'm a Cowboy fan. I wouldn't even look at this hiring and say, wow, this was a bad hiring. I just think it's one of those things you got to take with a grain of salt and just see what happens. What you're looking for is he going to do worse than Jason Garrett? That's kind of the question. You don't want a mediocre head coach. You want to start having winning seasons. You want to start making runs in playoffs with the talent, especially that they feel like they haven't accumulated. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I personally think that I think this can work. Obviously, the issue with Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay is very well noted. But obviously, Aaron Rodgers is an established superstar quarterback, has more of a personality. Obviously, remember for a period of time, a lot of people were saying, especially some of his receivers were like, Aaron Rodgers rubs people the wrong way. Dak isn't like Aaron Rodgers in terms of personality. You may come off and you say he's much more coachable than Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers really wasn't willing to be coached by Mike McCarthy because maybe he didn't feel like Mike McCarthy had the ability to coach them to success. Where with Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott, I feel like, has more of a tunnel to communicate with Dak and create a good chemistry between the two when it comes to the offense that they're going to be running this year. So it's going to be very important to see what happens in regards to that. I also believe that, if Mike McCarthy wants to be successful, he has to think about the strengths of his team and goes to the strengths. Zeke, an offensive line. Run the football, play action. Kind of like Minnesota's doing. You kind of got to run your team like that, and then he has to get more production on the defensive end, back end, and also in the D line, especially from DeMarcus Lawrence, the highest paid Cowboy in Cowboy history. So if there's going to be success and there's going to be parades and everybody's going to be like the Cowboys are back, it's going to be up to Mike McCarthy to really change what this team has been for the past decade, which has been mediocre at best, which every every second or third year they make a playoff run, which only ends in like one game. If they make a wild card, they win that, but they lose the next game. I mean, it's one of those things where you just got to see what happens. And we'll have to see if everything ends up going well for Mike McCarthy. So it's one of those things, like I said, we got to see what happens. But next coaching job that we're going to talk about is the Panthers hiring Matt Rule. Now, this also has been mixed with some mixed reviews. Now, obviously, Matt Rule in the media has been projected as a hot candidate. A lot of people maybe thought it could have been a media story. Why Matt Rule? Why do people think Matt Rule is NFL ready to make the jump from college to NFL? Obviously, the Panthers believe he was. That's why they gave him the contract they gave him. They think he's ready to maybe get this team to where they want to go. I also found out with Ron Rivera, I didn't even know this, the owner actually had given Ron Rivera a number of wins he wanted to reach this season, or he was fired. And I guess that's why they fired him when they fired him, because it was just like, well, you ain't going to reach the wins, so we're firing you. Because that's what I say, Ron Rivera's job to me was more surprising that they fired him, because it was kind of like, you couldn't let him finish the season. But I guess they felt like, hey, if we don't find success this year, I got to let you go. And so that's probably why that happened. But Matt Rule, he's a guy who, he went to Temple. First season, won one game, won 10 at Temple. Went to Baylor, won one game, now won 11 this past year. He's a guy who has structure. He's a guy who can command respect in the room. He's a guy who definitely shows that he can handle, a locker room. Now, the only difference is, clearly, the situation is these are college players, guys that you recruit. You've got their families. They wouldn't have came there if they didn't like you in the first place. Where these NFL players, that's not like that. They may already have their opinion on you before you walk in the room. But you can change that opinion by showing them what you can do for them. So it's one of those things where Matt Rule, I think it's going to be interesting what happens with this year in Carolina. He's going to have to figure out what happens with Cam Newton. He's going to talk to the GM and everybody about what they want to do with Cam, because you got to figure out, is Cam a part of your future or not? Because right now, what are you going to do at quarterback if you're the Carolina Panthers? That's really the real question here. Do you keep Cam for a year, draft the guy, or do you let Cam go and just already start for the new? I mean, Kyle Allen could still be your guy next year. He could be your bridge quarterback to the next guy. It just depends on what they want to do with Cam. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Cam, because obviously a lot of people are wondering about his future. Obviously missing the season with his shoulder injury. We'll have to see what they decide to do with Cam Newton and how he builds out the rest of this team. Because you have the star on both sides and Christian McCaffrey and Luke Kuechly, but how do you build out the rest of the roster to ensure success in the future? And then obviously a surprising hire. A lot of people were very surprised with this hire. Joe Judge, former special teams and wide receiver coach on the New England Patriots, hired by the New York Football Giants. A lot of people feel like that the Giants panicked when they hired Joe Judge because they lost Matt Rule. I think the thing what surprised people was there was still a lot of good coaching candidates out there, but there for some reason they made this decision. It's kind of suspicious. It's like, ever since Tom Coughlin, the guys they've hired haven't really been the best. They really haven't been. They haven't been the best. And then just making this such a hurried hire just makes you question, so what, what are they looking for in a guy? I don't know if they feel like, oh, he's from New England, so he has a good coaching structure, and he's under Bill Belichick, so if he can bring that here, we'll win. I mean, I don't know what their criteria was. I mean, obviously we don't know what's going to happen. We can't sit here and judge and think Joe Judge is going to be a failure. That would be way too fast, way too early to tell. But if it doesn't work out, a lot of people are going to start to question the decision-making of the New York Football Giants and their coaching hirings, because you're going to try to figure out why him, why is he a guy that you feel like was worth it? Because like I said, he wasn't even on a lot of people's radars. I don't feel like a lot of people even talked about him. So clearly, you got to kind of justify why this hiring was made and why you feel like he was the best guy for the job over a lot of other potential candidates that are out there. So that's going to be the one interesting, I think, situation. But coming up next, we're going to get into some more news. We're going to talk about Tom Brady saying that he still has things left to prove, and also the Browns are the only vacant job yet, and does Baker Mayfield need a reset?
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we talked about coaching, Mike McCarthy in Dallas, and some of the coaching vacancies that have been hired by the Giants and also by the Panthers. So now we're going to get into some more news and notes. We're going to talk about Tom Brady here. And Tom Brady posted something on IG saying he still has stuff left to prove. So I think that should kill any type of debate or any type of concern that he may not come back next season. Tom Brady is definitely coming back next season. We just don't know where he's coming back next season. Some people think he'll stay in New England. Some people think he'll leave. It really just depends. It's something that, obviously, that it's interesting for a lot of people to wonder about. And, we just hope for the best that Brady is still able to play at the level he's been able to play at for years, because he is one of the greatest quarterbacks, and some people consider the greatest quarterback of all times. I think it's very interesting, I think, that, he's saying this because there's still some things that have to be worked out on the New England side when it comes to Brady. Obviously, Brady wants to get paid. No discount. Brady also wants to feel love. He wants to feel appreciated by the organization. And, one thing about Brady, even though he didn't look as good as he usually does, we don't know if it's because of the lack of offensive talent and personnel that was around him, or was it because of his age? So obviously, if you're New England, you got to figure out your offensive problems. Now, the biggest thing is with Brady is this. If you bring Brady back, you would think New England would make some type of upgrade on the offensive side of the ball to improve something, which you would think then at that situation might put them in a good position. But if they lose Brady, now they're kind of like, okay, yeah, we could upgrade the receivers, but who the quarterback going to be? Do we have a quarterback who's reliable? And then you still don't know if Josh McDaniels is going to take a job, which the only job right now he could potentially take is Cleveland. So it's a lot of questions on the New England side of things. Obviously, you don't know what's going to happen with Brady and the Patriots. You don't know what's happening with Brady. Remember, his house is up for sale. So a lot of people like to take that as a sign that, oh, he's thinking about leaving. He's thinking about moving. He wants to go somewhere else because he put his home up for sale. I mean, this is just something we have to see that happens, really, at the end of the day with Tom Brady. Tom Brady's a guy who, if he comes back, the Patriot dynasty, in my opinion, is still intact. It still has a chance. I mean, because with Brady and the Patriots, they're probably still going to win the NFC, AFC next year, their AFC conference division. They're still going to make the playoffs. They're still going to be a winning team. They're still going to be a tough game to play against. So you wouldn't think it would just be one of those, oh yeah, this would be an easy win. This would be an easy W. This would be an easy, victory for whoever, plays them. It's going to be one of those games where you definitely are going to want to see if they can get the ship running. Obviously, they had some injuries this year. They had the turnstile left tackle. They had a injury to the center. Kicker was out the whole year. I mean, there were some things that didn't make New England the best that it could have been this year. But like I said, we're going to have to see what happens because obviously Brady needs some help if he did decide to come back to New England. And if he did leave, it'll just be a question of where and why. And that's going to be the biggest questions and stories I think come out of the Tom Brady story, in my opinion. But we really won't know too much until the next coming months, especially as we get closer to free agency in March. We're going to have to definitely see what Brady is thinking and what he's considering in his free agency decision. Next story we're going to talk about is the Cleveland Browns job is the only job currently still open that has not been filled yet. And they have many interviews scheduled this week for the rest of the week. So clearly they're gearing up, interviewing guys. The report is that they want to make a decision on their head coach by Saturday. So we might hear something by Saturday on who they pick up as their new head coach. A lot of people are connecting Josh McDaniels to it because they feel like he's the biggest name left. But some people also don't feel like this is the best fit. It's just that's what's left. Does he feel like it's a good job? Now, there have been people saying that Josh McDaniels is high on Baker. So that would obviously be a plus if he wanted to go with Cleveland and join the Cleveland Browns. So it's definitely something that you have to keep an eye on. And I think that potentially, I think it could be a good decision. I don't feel like it's something that should be slept on. I don't feel like it's something that, that we should worry about too much in regards to who he's going to hire, because Cleveland has a lot of options and they just need to sit here, interview, and make the best decision for the squad and make the best decision for the team and the organization. You don't want to whiff on this. You whiffed with Freddie Kitchens. You can redeem yourself. You need a guy who can handle the locker room. You need a guy who can handle the players that they have, especially if they go ahead and keep Odell and they go ahead and keep Jarvis. You got to have a strong leader, Myles Garrett. You're going to have to find somebody who can help this team reach its maximum potential. It's about leadership and coaching. The NFL, to me, is becoming it's not a players league. It's becoming a coaches league because coaching is extremely important because of the systematics of the NFL. The NBA, if you got LeBron James, screw coaching. LeBron James is better than your coaching, so he can beat your coaching. NFL, yeah, you might have great players. And yeah, talent still matters. But if you have the right game plan, a team that is not as talented can be elevated to play just as good of a team that is more talented. Because coaching matters. It shows. It really shows in the league that coaching matters. And so then with the Cleveland situation, you want to make sure that you're bringing in a quality head coach that can coach this team, reach its potential, systematically fit, and also be a leader in the locker room. That's what you need. Because one thing that's going to cure the issues that Cleveland had is winning. And they haven't won in a long time. And when you're trying to change a losing culture, and then you bring a lot of personalities into a losing culture, there's a chance for some combustible elements, which you kind of saw at points, especially at the end of the season with Odell, Jarvis Landry, when it came to Freddie Kitchens. Now, this leads me to my next point of does Baker need to reset? I think a reset would be best for him. I think Baker still has talent. Some people are wondering, is Baker, is this what he is? I think Baker first has to reinvent himself. He has to take time out and really try to fix what may have hindered him before and to fix, the things that have been plaguing him, like some high interceptions and stuff. Because even in college, he was never a big guy who was big in terms of interceptions. And so him throwing 21 this year was very much out of character. And just in terms of what you've seen for the last few years. Especially with the weapons they have, too. So you definitely think he needs to reinvent himself. He needs to become more mature. He needs to not let the outside noise bug him so much. You got to learn how to channel outside noise. Some people get the outside noise and they don't say anything, but it motivates them. And that's how most players do it. But if you engage it, confront it, talk about it, it puts more scrutiny on you because now you're saying something. And now there's more spotlight on you because you're saying something about it. And so if you don't go out there and back it up, it makes you look really bad. So, or it can make you look like you're all talk but no action. Baker just needs to reinvent himself. Personally, I think you need to bring in guys who Baker likes. And you need to bring in a guy who wants to work with Baker and make Baker better. You want to work with a guy who feels like, okay, we know what his strengths are. We know what he needs to improve on. Let's work on it. Let's fix it. So then when the next season comes around, you can be the best quarterback for us to lead us where we want to go with the talent that we possess. And you're going to need a coach that can really think with Baker, talk to Baker, to have a close relationship with him so that way he can reach his full potential and end up making Cleveland better, as some people noted him as the savior of Cleveland. So it's going to be very important for him to come out there, be coached up, be willing to be coached, make adjustments to him so he can produce for Cleveland down long term. But coming up next, we're going to get into some college football talk coming up right here.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. And we're going to get into some college football talk. But last, we talked about Cleveland job still being the only job still available. We talked about this Baker need a total reset. And we also talked about Tom Brady still saying that he has something to prove going into being 43 years old. And now we're going to switch to the college ranks. The national championship's coming up next Monday. This is obviously a very big game. Biggest game in college football all year. All the bowl games have been completed. This is the game for all the marbles. This is the game everybody wants to see. You have the two best teams in college football. Clemson defending their national championship, going against the upstart LSU Tigers with Heisman Trophy winner Joe Burrow. A great matchup. Two great coaches. And, you know, it's funny. Egg Orgeron had a quote that I think added to his legacy. Somebody asked, why does he get to workouts 2 hours earlier than everybody else? And he was like, I'll have to paraphrase it because he used some language we can't use in this podcast, but he was like, the day I can't get up and whoop a man's butt is the day I don't get out of bed. And that was just very Coach O-like. It was such a Coach O statement. And he's a guy that the way he is, you definitely would love to play for a man like that. So congrats to him. But yeah, we're going to get to the game, and this game is very, very interesting. The question is, it's kind of funny to say this, but the question is, how much can Clemson's defense stop LSU's offense? LSU has won against some of the best defenses, which I feel like their best defense outside of the best defense they played all year was Georgia. I feel like Georgia was the best overall defense they played all year. Because Alabama's, I think, is not better than Georgia's. So, and they dropped 37. They dropped 37. And I think that's indicative of how explosive their offense is. And Clemson, this is probably the best offensive team they're going to play all year. Now, obviously, you could say last week was the best offensive team they played all year, and they did pretty decent in the first quarter, especially first half. There was kind of some issues. Obviously, Ohio State got off to a quick start, but they were able to shut them down really for the rest of the game and get some turnovers and get some stops. So I think in this game is going to be kind of a recollection of that. How many stops can Clemson get? And then obviously Clemson, I feel like they cannot get off to another slow start. They have to get off to a fast start if they're going to beat the LSU Tigers. I feel like Clemson's going to have to score at least 30 in this game to have a chance. I don't think this is going to be like a 24-16 game. I think this is going to be a 30-plus game. And if they can score 30 points and then get some key stops and some key turnovers, I definitely think Clemson has the ability to come into this game and defend their national championship and have their consecutive undefeated season in a row. Like I said, both of these teams deserve to be here. Both of these teams play at a very high level. And, you know, for me, I feel like it's going to come down to some things where I was obviously talking about what Clemson has to do, but LSU's is kind of the same question. How effective is LSU's defense going to be against that Clemson offense? Obviously, you know the talent they have with Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence. Where Trevor Lawrence really impressed you last week or the last time they played with his running ability. You know, he was able to run all over the Ohio State defense, which you really never saw a lot of from Trevor Lawrence. So it was a great thing that he was able to do that in that situation. Because now, if you're LSU, you have to account for him in the running game with such an explosive back like Travis Etienne. Then you can't forget about their top receivers, Higgins and Justin Ross. Justin Ross had his coming out party against Alabama last year in the national championship, completely, basically just being unstoppable against those Alabama defensive backs. And Clemson's defensive backs got to be ready. Now, Clemson usually recruits very physical, taller and physical corners, so I think that's going to be a good matchup on the end with LSU's receivers. because LSU's receivers, obviously we know about Jefferson, a guy who was a 2-star recruit. And his brother played there. I think the other quarterback from a couple of years ago, Jefferson, I think it was, I forgot his name, but yeah, he was Jefferson. And, he's developed himself into a number one receiver and a potential draft pick. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see just that passing matchup. Obviously, if I'm LSU, I might try to take advantage of some matchups like the safety Moose on the Clemson, the secondary in the safety position. He's intelligent, great in the run, but he has a little bit of liability in the passing game. So if I'm Moss, this tight end for LSU, you definitely want to try to take advantage of that matchup. You do have the mismatch advantage in that situation. Moss is a big guy. He's also very athletic, the son of Randy Moss, might I add. And, like I said, LSU has weapons across the board. And we also got to see what happens with Edwards, the running back, who really didn't play last time they played because of an injury. But now he's had 2 weeks to recover. He should be 100% for the national championship. And we know how much of a difference he made because he had his coming out party against Alabama. So clearly this is going to be something that's going to be much interesting. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I think, this game's going to come down to also who makes the right coaching decision. Obviously, both coaches are aggressive. But the key to me is, when do you get aggressive? What situations? I could see a fake punt in this game. Now, when championship games like this, you pull out all the stops. This is your last game of the season. So you're going to be very aggressive, especially from both sides. You're going to see teams pull out a fake punt. Maybe they'll go for it more on fourth down more. I definitely see that as a potential, the difference maker in this game, depending on the timing and when somebody makes that play, because clearly, like I said, both teams are going to put it all out there on the line to win this national championship. Obviously, Clemson's motto the whole year is that they feel like they've been disrespected, that people feel like some people didn't think they deserved to be there because of their schedule. But obviously being Ohio State helped, basically hush the haters and let them know, like, hey, we deserve to be here. We think that we are good enough, or we are good enough. And we've shown it before last year, and we'll show it again to be the best team in college football again for a second straight year in a row. LSU, obviously, this is just a great redemption story for Coach O and LSU's the program. Always had talent, just never could find the right quarterback to get them over the top. They finally found that guy in Joe Burrow, transfer from Ohio State. First year wasn't the best. Second year changed the offense. Now he's the Heisman Trophy winner. This man has showed some great plays, accurate, great arm, makes plays, Heisman moments. Trevor Lawrence didn't have the season to start the year to start off. That was so fantastic. Fired. He got on fire to end the season, and he plays his best football when it counts in the biggest games, and that's why a lot of people have always even said from when he was a freshman that he was the consensus number one overall draft pick coming into not this year's draft but next year's draft in the NFL because of his talent, his poise, his clutchness, his arm strength, his accuracy, his leadership. There's a lot of great things that you love about Trevor Lawrence. Now, I got to give y'all a prediction in this game. I'm going to go the LSU Tigers. I think LSU is just too much to stop offensively. I think they're going to score enough points. I think they're going to beat Clemson in a shootout. Listen, if LSU doesn't turn the ball over, I think if they play a clean game, I think that this just man-to-man, they should be able to beat Clemson. I think they have the better team and the better talent, in my personal opinion. But, again, Clemson's had a great year, and if they won, I would not come on this podcast and be shocked. I'll not sit here and be like I'm surprised. Now, if they did what they did at Alabama last year and blow them out, then I'll be surprised. But if it's a close game and they win, I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm going to go with LSU in this game. I think LSU is going to be able to pick up the victory. But coming up next, we're going to get into my predictions on those wild card games I told you about. And also, I'm going to give y'all my top quarterback trust rankings, who I trust more in this week's games.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about college football playoff national championship game, my predictions and my thoughts on that game, what I thought about both teams in that game, and just, my overall, just like I said, opinions and predictions. If you missed that, you definitely need to go back and watch that, listen to that, because, like I said, it's the biggest game in college football all year. It's the last game of college football of the year, so if you love college football, you definitely don't want to miss that game. But now we're going to make predictions on the wild card games. And I'm going to start with the Vikings and 49ers. I'm going to go with the 49ers in this game. There's a part of me that wants the Vikings to win just to continue the Kirk Cousins story and narrative, because a lot of people obviously don't believe in him. But I do think the 49ers are going to be able to pull out a victory. I think it's going to be a close game. I think the 49ers are going to have to win at the end. I don't feel like this is going to be they're going to outplay Minnesota. I feel like it's just one of those things where, the 49ers are just, I feel like they have great coaching, and Kyle Shanahan is one of the best offensive gurus. I think they're going to figure out how to beat this Minnesota secondary. That is their weakness right now on defense, with Emmanuel Sanders and George Kittle. So I definitely think that they're going to be able to pick up the victory. I think they're going to be able to pick up the win. And, obviously, X Factor, Dalvin Cook. If Dalvin Cook plays like he played last week, and maybe even plays even better, that can mess up my whole prediction. But I'm sticking with the 49ers. I think the 49ers are going to win their home playoff game, and Jimmy Garoppolo is going to hush some of the haters this weekend. In the second game, we Packers and Seahawks. I'm going to go with. This is a tough one for me. I want to go with Seattle. I do. I just feel like I don't know. I just feel like Seattle and Russell Wilson would be able to pull it out in a game like this. But you know what? I'm gonna go with Seattle. I'm gonna go with Seattle for the upset. I think they're gonna go to Lambeau Field. They're gonna beat them. I just feel like Russell Wilson's gonna make the plays late. I think it's gonna be a close game, and he's gonna make the plays late, and he's gonna lead them to a win. I really truly believe that. With how deceptible the Packers defense is, if DK Metcalf and them have a good game still, I don't see why they wouldn't. To me, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to. I think that they have all the capabilities in the world to be able to beat Green Bay at Green Bay. I mean, like I said, they played some great games in the past between these two teams. So, for me, I feel like this is definitely what I think. That's how I feel. And I'm going to go with Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks. And I also think this is also going to be Marshawn Lynch's best game. So, I definitely feel like that Marshawn is going to get more of a beast modeness underneath him coming into this game. Next game to make prediction on is Kansas City and the Houston Texans. I'm going to go with Kansas City in this game. I just feel like Patrick Mahomes is unstoppable. I think he's destined to win the Super Bowl this year. I think that he, with the way the Super Bowl went last year. Now, obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs weren't as dominant as the Rams were. We obviously knew about last year's game between the Rams and the Chiefs. where that was just an explosive game. But a part of me just feels like he would have won it last year if he made it. And if he makes it this year, he's going to win it. Because can you really go against Kansas City? And the difference is this year, Kansas City's defense is playing much, much, much better. They're playing at a much, much, much higher level. And with them still being just as efficient offensively, maybe not numbers-wise, but obviously Mahomes was hurt and a couple other things with injuries as receiving for it, but everybody's healthy. Mahomes is healthy. And I don't think Houston's defense is going to be able to slow down the offense. Now, obviously, you don't want to count Deshaun Watson because Deshaun Watson can single-handedly, if he has to, keep them in the game. But I just personally feel like Patrick Mahomes is going to be too much. And I think he's going to be able to pick up the victory for the Houston Texans this weekend and lead them to a win and lead them to the AFC Championship game. And the last game I make a prediction on is Baltimore and Tennessee. I'm going to go with Baltimore for this game. I think Lamar Jackson's going to make enough plays to beat Ryan Tannehill. I think this game is just going to come down to, like I said, the quarterbacks who's make more plays in the passing game. And I just think the Ravens are going to be able to make those plays. They're going to be able to do what they have to do to be successful. And that's what I think is pretty much going to be the difference in this game. And like I said, both teams can run the ball. And both teams can play some good defense. And I don't feel like coaching is going to be too much of a lean side or a lopsided, coaching mismatch. So I think it just comes down to the quarterbacks. And if you trust Lamar more than you trust Ryan Tannehill, then that's why you're going to go with him. If you trust Ryan Tannehill more than you trust Lamar, that's why you're going to go with Tennessee. And those are my predictions on this week's divisional playoff games. But now this is going to switch me into, like I was saying, talking about trusting quarterbacks. I want to give you all the 8 quarterbacks who I trust the most and who I trust the least. So I'm going to give you my top 5. I'm not going to give all. I'm going to give you my top 5 quarterbacks I trust this week. At number 5, I'm going to put Jimmy G because, he's never been in a situation before. So I feel like we can't sit here and say, yeah, I trust him more than any of the quarterbacks that have experience because we haven't. Now, he has maybe the best team in some people's mind out of every team, but we haven't seen him himself in this situation with this team. And once we see that, then we can make a prediction on how good he's going to be, if he's going to be as good as everybody expects him to be, and, all of that. Number 4, I'm going to go with Russell Wilson. Even though I told you I think he's going to make a clutch play, I feel like it's also his downfall. The Seattle Seahawks depend a lot on him. So if something goes awry, then it's going to affect Russell Wilson's play. It's like when you put all your hope in one guy, it could put a lot of pressure on him to produce because you're expecting him to do everything for you. And I think if just something goes awry, it could really mess with Russell Wilson this week and could make his play inconsistent. But number 4 isn't bad. Because like I said, he can still win you a ball game in the end. Number 3 would go with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, I don't feel like him and Russell Wilson are that far apart in this ranking. I just feel like, Rodgers is Rodgers. We think Rodgers, he hasn't been in this position in a while. But we think he's ready to be in this position again, especially with his new head coach, Matt LaFleur. And I think they have all the capabilities to be just as good as any team, like I said, in the league. And it just really depends. With the running game they have with Aaron Jones, if they can get some plays in the passing game, Rodgers can be just as efficient and as dangerous as any quarterback in this entire playoffs. That's why I feel like number 3 is a good spot for him, and I think he'll be able to do what he has to do to be successful at the end of the day. At number 2, I have Lamar Jackson. I know he doesn't have as much playoff experience, and the last time he was in the playoffs, he didn't play that well. But I just feel like Lamar Jackson, I feel like one thing I think what helps him is that Lamar Jackson knows his strengths. He knows what he does well. He knows what he is. He knows what he needs to do, and he's going to do it when he needs to do it. I don't feel like there's any questions about what he's going to do, how he's going to do it. Can he do this? Can he do that? I think we know what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and why they do it. And I think that type of clarity with him helps him be able to come out there and just play to the best of his abilities, which is why I put him at number 2 in my quarterbacks that I trust. And I think, obviously, if we're going to number 1, Patrick Mahomes, I just feel like I said, Patrick Mahomes is the most talented out of every quarterback in this round. I feel like I said, he was a player who making the Super Bowl last year, with the weapons he has. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to not put him number 1. It's hard to not say Patrick Mahomes should be the most trusted out of all the quarterbacks in the divisional round this week. And I'm going to go with him at number 1. It's the quarterbacks I trust. And those are my top 5 quarterbacks that I trust in the divisional playoffs this week. And, that's how it goes. But that's all for me today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you, and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.